To settle down, but it is 7:30. It's great to see so many people here, this is the biggest turnout we've had since we had Peter Tatchell a while back. That was very different, but he was talking about religion and politics. So my name is Tony Challis, and I am the president of Nottingham Secular Society. We're affiliated to the National Secular Society and to the British Humanist Association. We exist to promote a fully secular society where people of all faiths and none are able to live according to their beliefs, and no group is privileged or discriminated against. We believe in a society based on tolerance, compassion and understanding. The debate before us tonight is to be proposed by Gary, and it is that this House believes that fracking is intrinsically safe and will be of great benefit to this country, and we will have Dennis to oppose. We'll have two 20-minute sessions where first Gary and then Dennis will speak, and then we have an interval of 15 minutes, and then we have Dennis and Gary coming back. They will give a 5-minute summing up, and then there'll be 30 minutes for questions and answers. So it would be a good idea during the interval, as 30 minutes will go very quickly, if people sort of think of succinct questions or statements during that time. Now, Gary Hayweood is CEO of INEOS Shale. He's over 30 years' experience in operating and optimising large gas, oil and chemical facilities across Australia and Europe. He leads a team of highly experienced people in shale gas exploration and production, including world-recognised US shale gas experts. Prior to joining INEOS, Gary spent over 25 years in BP leading businesses in refining, chemicals and the Forties pipeline system. His interests include running, astronomy, rugby and cricket. He's a keen collector of antiquarian books, and he collects especially books underpinning the modern science. So I will give a simple introduction to Dennis when it comes to his turn, but for now I give you Gary for his 20 minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and welcome everyone. Good to see a lot of turnout here, and hopefully we'll have an interesting session. As Tony said, this is the statement I think that we're going to be debating tonight. Just a couple of points I guess I wanted to make in the way I'm assuming that what we mean by this. I mean, fracking is a term that I'm assuming we're talking about the entire process of shale gas production, because fracking or hydraulic fracturing is a piece of the process, and I'm not necessarily just addressing that. I'm assuming we're talking about shale gas, which includes hydraulic fracturing. The other thing in the statement is intrinsically safe. I mean, people like me who work in refining chemical plants, intrinsically safe has a very specific meaning about working within a dangerous atmosphere with electrical equipment that's safe. And I'm not talking about that. I'm assuming what it means is more the English definition, which is relating to the essential nature of the thing. Okay, so that's what I'll be talking about. I'm going to be making the case for shale gas because, I mean, you know, what is it that I'm here trying to talk to you guys about? Why should you be sitting there believing this is something we should do? You can see up there, I mean, I hope that you'll leave this with some idea of what we think the benefits are for the country and for everyone here. I'll give you some idea about what the process is, because a lot of people know, but a lot of people don't know, so I'll give you an idea about that. I want to talk about the safety and environmental aspects of what we do and how that relates to why you should believe that can be done safely and with respect to the environment. And I'll tackle some of the key objections, because being in this game, we're quite familiar with the sorts of things that people might object to with this potential industry. And I'd like to I'll finish off by covering some of the independent evidence. I want to start with a little bit of context, because if we're looking at doing this, a lot of people say, well, why should we be doing this? And I think these two graphs illustrate for me what the fundamental issue is as to why a company like mine, or indeed lots of other companies, are looking to produce gas in the UK. This one is the production from the North Sea of gas and oil, and you can see that in about the year 2000.
We can't hear you.
All right, I'm sorry. How's I think we have success, right.
Is that loud enough?
Loud enough, everyone? Can you hear me? Yeah. Good, okay. Right, if I point to the graph at the top, this is North Sea oil and gas production, and as you can see, from the year 2000, rapidly declining. As part of the issue, I mean, I was working in the North Sea in 2000, and we didn't know what to do with the gas. We had so much of it. These days, we've got a big issue. On the bottom, you can see the UK's trade in natural gas, supply and demand. From about the year 2000, you can see that the graph down the bottom here shows very rapid increase in imports to the UK. And today, the UK imports about 50% or over 50% of the demand of natural gas. So, and it's getting worse as the mature basin in the North Sea declines. So what do we need gas? I mean, there's a few reasons. I mean, not only do we need 84% of UK homes rely on gas for their heating at the moment, we also use gas to produce a lot of things that we use in everyday life. A lot of it's used for heat and power, but not all of it. It's also used for producing plastics, pharmaceuticals, cosmetics, electronics, all the things you can see listed there. And of course, renewables. I mean, with growing share of renewables, and that's very important, and I'll say a bit more about that as we go forward, but it's going to take time to grow renewable capacity, and also we have to have energy produced for our use when renewables can't fill the gap. So anyway, the benefits of the local shale gas industry, which is one of the things I said I'd try and get across, there's four fundamental benefits I'll talk about. Energy security, so that's the one I just talked about with imports of gas. 50% at the moment, forecast to increase to 80% in a few decades, and for the UK that's a big problem. Climate change, shale gas, local shale gas versus imported gas is 10% more efficient from a greenhouse gas perspective. So, and for power generation, we're phasing out coal as a country over the next 5 or 10 years, hopefully. But the carbon emissions from gas are less than half of what they are from coal when you're talking about generating power. So, from a climate change perspective, shale gas, or gas, it doesn't have to be shale gas, but the gas that we've got in the UK is available as shale gas, and shale gas is much more climate and carbon efficient than importing. Of course, the other benefits, jobs and investment. So tens of thousands, 60-odd thousand jobs is the estimate, and billions, tens of billions of pounds of investment could be made into this industry in the UK, which is something I think the UK has seen manufacturing decline over the last decade, less than half of what it was 15 years ago. So it provides an enormous benefit for the economy. Revenues and community benefits, INEOS in particular has proposed and promised that we'll give 6% of the revenue from shale gas production back into local communities. So that's about £1 million per well, just to give you an idea. So that's quite a substantial benefit flowing into local communities. And of course, balance of payments. I mean, today, with the amount of gas we're importing as a country, we're putting £7 billion a year overseas, paying for other people's economies to produce gas in regimes that are not necessarily as attractive as the UK in terms of regulation, in terms of human rights. So in terms of the performance for the country, tax receipts here, not overseas, it's a big benefit. What does it look like? I just want to give you an idea about what a shale gas development looks like. It's got a very small surface footprint, so if I try and explain that, a pad, which is a small area, think of it like a football pitch, has about 10 wells on it. At the surface, you have a pad every 10 or 15 square kilometres. So they're very spaced out. Like most developments, and there's a lot of things that we develop in the country, and we can come back onto that, but the build phase is temporary. So yes, there are, as I've said there, right, there are some intensive truck movements, bringing equipment on off-site, water, that happens during the phase at the beginning and at the end. There is a drilling phase for a few months, and the fracturing takes a few weeks. So these phases happen during the building of the pad. But after that, you have many, many years, a couple of decades of gas production. So, and during that phase, I mean, you wouldn't notice what the thing looks like. So if I try and there's a picture here to try and illustrate what I'm talking about. You have, at the surface, you have these wells drilled, and then we steer underneath the surface so that down 3 kilometres where the shale is, the wells go off horizontally. They go off 3 kilometres in that direction. They're spaced maybe 300, 400, 500 metres apart, and they cover that large area I'm talking about in the shale layer. So down at 3 kilometres down, you cover a huge area. At the surface, it's very small. If I just show you a few pictures about what the stages are, you start by drilling, and that's what a drilling rig looks like. So when you have that on the pad, you drill the wells. That's the first thing that happens. So that we bring that on, drill the wells, and then that disappears. You then do the hydraulic fracturing. This is the equipment that we bring on to do the hydraulic fracturing. So there's quite a few trucks there that have got pumps on them that pump the water and the sand and the chemical down into the well to fracture the shale. The fracturing makes cracks in the shale, tiny, tiny cracks that let the gas flow out. So that's the reason we do that. And then production, once the trucks go away, because to fracture a well takes a day and a half. To fracture a number of 10 wells, it might be there a few weeks. Once you're finished, that all goes away. You end up with that's a pad there that you can see. That's actually one from Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania looks a lot like the UK in terms of the geography. This is a pad that exists in the UK. It's coal bed methane. It's not shale, but the appearance is the same. So you can see that it's it has some wells on it. It has a couple of bits and pieces at the side, but it's fairly well screened. I mean, that's the view from the ground, so that the trees in the way. I mean, you can't see much once these things are constructed. They produce gas. The gas gets exported by a pipeline. You wouldn't know they were there, basically. So anyway, I just wanted to give you a bit of a view for those of you, and it's very quick canter through what this process is, but just to give you a feel. What I want to do now is just cover a few of the objections that we used to hear, and to try and uncover some of the things that people may be worried about, and give our impression, interpretation and view on what the answers are to these questions. So often we'll hear, that one of the fundamental objections to shale is about climate change. So we'll hear fossil fuels are bad, we'll hear that we should be developing renewables, and I've heard starting a new fossil fuel industry, why do we want to be doing that? It's the old way, not the new way. I mean, I think the first thing I'd say is, if you're talking gas versus renewables, this isn't really, I mean, we never see this as a gas versus renewables debate. We're not standing here, I'm not standing here trying to say I think this is competing with renewables, because shale gas or gas from the North Sea or any gas doesn't compete with renewables. We need both of them. We've got 22 million homes today in the UK that use gas for heating. Probably a lot of you sitting in this room tonight have gas supplied into your home. And eventually, down the track, at some point in the following decades, we as a society are going to need to tackle the use of gas, and there's no question about that. But it's going to take decades. I mean, I've given an example there. If we're going to electrify all those homes, it's going to take decades. Even if you did it by 2050, you're going to have to do 2,000 homes every day until 2050 to get that converted. Now, we as a society will have to do that, but it can't happen overnight. if you look in the future, there are some other alternatives as well for using the infrastructure we have. So one of the things that we can see as a possibility, it's got some work to be done, but you can use gas in what's called a steam methane reformer to make hydrogen, and then use the existing gas infrastructure to circulate hydrogen to homes. And boilers and cookers can use that gas. I mean, they need some modification, but it's a lot simpler than electrification in a lot of cases. So there are some solutions out there too in the future that could see the infrastructure we've got being supplied with gas. The advantage of steam methane reforming is that it makes it much easier to capture the carbon and sequester it. So, because the key issue with gas, no matter which way you look at it, is carbon emissions. So anyway, we would say this isn't a question of renewables. We're not arguing against renewables. The company I work for makes a lot of raw materials that go into producing renewables. But the point is that we can't stop. If someone says to you, well, we should be investing in renewables, absolutely, but what are we going to do tomorrow? We're going to need gas for decades. That's the point. Even if you look at asking some of the non-governmental organisations that would say we shouldn't be doing this, look at their own material. I've got a chart here that's taken from the Friends of the Earth model that you can go, I've left the reference there. But you can see from that there is still substantial demand of fossil fuel for decades, because even in the scenarios that Friends of the Earth paint, we're going to need to do that. So I think the point is that, the question for me that we should ask, and what I ask the NGOs when they make the point that we shouldn't be doing this, I say, well, what's the alternative? What is your solution? How do you get the pathway from here to that renewable future? And when I look at it, yes, there'll be growth in nuclear. Yes, there'll be substantial growth in renewables, but the time it takes, the smart way to fill that gap is with gas. And the climate performance I already touched on, but if you're going to use gas, as what I've said there, it's not a question of whether we need gas. We're going to need gas. If we're going to have a society, anything like what we've got today, we're going to need gas for decades. And it's not a question of if we need it, it's a question of where it's going to come from. And if it's going to get imported, it's less carbon efficient than if we produce it locally. And we're going to send all that money offshore, and we're not going to have the tax revenues in the UK, and we're not going to have the jobs, we're not going to have the investment. So, we look at that, we say, why would you not want to we've got a resource under our feet that belongs to the nation. And whether we do it or some other company does it, it would be a crime, in our view, not to take advantage of this resource to produce the gas that the country needs. Another objection is the risks from shale involve water contamination, uses cancer-causing chemicals, and lots of examples in the US apparently. Well, I mean, our view on this is that yes, there have been some contamination incidents in the US, but they're not a result of fracking, they're a result of well failure, they're a result of the poor standards in areas where the standards are not the same as in the UK. UK regulations are the most stringent in the world, and I've listed a few there about I'll show you in a moment a picture of what a well looks like, but the regulations we have in the UK for well construction, the regulations that we have for the regulator insists on proving well design, that we have independent well examiners that assure that it's done properly. We have to do baseline testing of the water aquifer 12 months before we do any of this. We have to continuously monitor it afterwards. And all the chemicals we use have to be approved as non-hazardous by the EA to groundwater. So there's a number of protections. The UK regulatory regime is created to make sure that this industry can be done safely. I'm sure we'll get some questions on this. And I mean, the point I'd make, yes, there have been some contamination incidents in the US related to well failure, but there haven't been any contamination incidents related to hydraulic fracturing, which is what people, when they think of fracking, that's what they're thinking of. And that's I mean, bearing in mind these fractures are taking place 3 kilometres down, and typically you're talking about the fractures being a few hundred metres at the most. So, pathways to the surface from that depth is not what causes any issue. It's well failure. That's what this is a cutaway version of what a well will look like, where you have several layers of steel with concrete in between them. So that one's got 5. I mean, not all of them have 5. Some have 3, some have 4, some have 5. It depends on the structure of the geology. But you can see over on the left there that to provide some sense of the scale, the shale is somewhere between 2,500 and 3,500 metres or 4,000 metres in the UK. It's that sort of depth. So shard, that's how many shards it is down in depth. It's very, very deep. Another objection is fracking risks causing seismic activity, which was seen in the UK in 2011, and Oklahoma is often cited as being an example of what the impact has been and the recent tremor performance in Oklahoma. I mean, will it cause tremors in the UK? I mean, hydraulic fracturing, yes, it can cause seismic activity. There's no question about that. But the seismic activity, I mean, the whole nature of fracturing the shale, if you use sensitive instruments, you can pick up these vibrations, because that's what's happening when you fracture the shale. To get what people normally would be concerned about, to get anything that you detect at the surface, so to do what we would call a felt tremor, is very difficult. It can happen. There have been a few in the world where shale wells have drilled through faults. In the UK, the regulations require us to have seismic done prior to drilling wells so that we can see where the faults are. So and we've got the most stringent system in the world, what we call traffic light system, where we have to monitor when we're doing fracturing to ensure that the performance during the fracture, and if we see anything, which we shouldn't do because we know where the faults are, but if we did, then we can see it and we have to stop and find out what's going on. So there's the map there, just for interest, is a map of the red dots are the natural seismic events that have happened in the UK over a 5-year period. And you can see that there are hundreds of tremors every day that are natural. They're not felt. They're measured by the British Geological Survey's network of instruments. The tremors that happened in Lancashire were tremors that were in that range of 20, 30 or hundreds per year is the frequency of those sort of size of tremors, just to put some context around it. Another objection is about health. We often hear there's been hundreds and hundreds of peer-reviewed articles that talk about health. I think the thing I'd say about this is, how do any of us or any of you sitting in this audience, how do you review every single peer-reviewed article that's published? And I think the answer is we've got to rely upon some of the credible independent experts. You won't want to take my word for it. But I mean, Public Health England looked at this evidence and said, well, you can see their statement there, that this can be done. The risks are low. Again, if it's properly run and regulated, it's fundamental that the regulation in the UK, like it has been in the North Sea, the regulation in the UK has led to a very safe and successful industry in the North Sea, oil and gas industry, and it'll be the same for onshore oil and gas. Another one is, it's inherently risky, and I'll sometimes hear people say, well, how can we be absolutely sure? Shouldn't we take caution? Shouldn't we use, until we can be absolutely sure? And I guess, should we ask for 100% guarantees? I mean, everything we do in life, coming here, the fact that we've got energy, the fact that we've got heating, the fact that we've got everything that we have, food, shelter, and the things we use every day in our everyday life, involve activities in society that all have some risk. So I never stand up and say, whether it's shale gas or whether it's driving on the road or whether it's what I did before, which was operating oil refineries, none of this is without risks that we manage every day. And we manage oil refineries. We've got 2 oil refineries in the company that we manage every single day to make sure that we put fuel in your cars. You know, shale is nothing, I would say, is nothing special versus a lot of these activities. It's got its inherent risks and they're managed, and we are very confident, and the evidence says, and the experts say it can be managed. And the regime in the UK is extremely strict to make sure that happens. Just to finish off on some independent regulation, I mean, these are the bodies that regulate the industry in the UK. So you've got the Oil and Gas Authority for licensing, you've got the Environment Agency, you've got the Health and Safety Executive. Of course, you've got the local planning authorities which would approve, relying on the views of those bodies. And of course, independent well verification. We have to have an independent view on each well design. The Royal Society, you can read their statement there, but they have said as well, they did a study of this industry and they concluded from reviewing all the evidence, the Royal Society and the Royal Academy of Engineering, that this can be done, and it can be done safely as long as we follow best practice and we follow the regulation. So again, it comes back to the UK regulatory regime. Public Health England I spoke about already. So I mean, in summary, you know, our summary of this is we need gas, right? We're going to need it for decades. No matter, it's not about renewables versus gas. We need gas if we're going to have a society we've got. We should have a secure supply of gas is our position for the UK, not rely on imports. We should do it with the most climate-friendly fuel we can find, and at the moment that's gas, and if anyone else has got a better idea, let me know. Local development of shale gas can bring jobs and investment and community benefits. And you know, the independent authorities, the Royal Society, the Royal Academy of Engineering, Public Health England, have all said that this can be done safely, and it can be done provided we have the regulation that we do have in the UK and it's followed. So, you know, my position is, why wouldn't you do that? So, thank you very much for your attention. Appreciate it. Cheers.
Well, thank you very much, Gary, for a thorough exposition. Now, for the opposition to the motion, we have Dennis May of Frack-free Nottinghamshire. Dennis May is proud to be native of Nottingham. Whilst working in the construction industry, a passion for climbing led into industrial rope access, abseiling. He subsequently experienced working in a wide variety of industrial environments. 10 years later, standing on a railway embankment, with snow going down the back of his neck, Dennis decided on some career development, and that's led to qualifications in occupational health and safety. And for the past 10 years, he's worked as a health, safety and environmental advisor for a major contractor in the power industry. Now, I reckon Gary had about 25 minutes, so if you try to stick with that. Do you want to use the PowerPoint at all?
Yeah, I will do.
Yeah, you will. Okay, thanks.
Turn your mic off. Don't actually watch this. So, everybody hear me? Fracking is inherently safe and will be of benefit to the UK. I obviously contest that, and I'm going to just apply a simple model that we use in industry about building a safety case. Then I'm going to look at the fracker's safety case. I call it a safety case, I put it in inverted commas. I believe it's more sales and marketing than safety case, in respect to the threat to our water, seismic risks and adverse health effects. I'm going to question the benefits of shale gas and then query this, their stand on gold standard regulations.
Yes, speak up.
Sorry, I do apologise.
Just hold the mic more in front of your mouth, so.
I'm not used to this. Never wanted to be a pop star. So, building a safety case, quite a simple process really. This is what we do in industry. Evaluate the risks and implement controls via a suitable and sufficient risk assessment, i.e. a risk assessment that applies to the task we are doing. and then carry out a cost-benefit analysis, and can the residual risk really be justified? So the risk assessment process, we identify all significant hazards. A hazard is something that has the potential to cause harm. Who can be harmed and how? We quantify the risk. What's the likelihood of something going wrong? What are the severities of the outcome? Apply control measures using what we call the principles of prevention, a hierarchy of control. And then we review the situation to make sure that it's ongoing, it's a current situation, and we adapt to any changes. The hierarchy of controls we would apply, to start with, we eliminate the hazard if we can. We substitute the dangerous for the less dangerous and isolate the hazard using engineering controls. An example of this would be a pedestrian barrier, keeping the pedestrians away from the traffic. After that, we implement behavioural controls. A zebra crossing would be an example. You are supposed to use the crossing, the cars are supposed to stop. Obviously, it doesn't always work like that. And then get down to personal protection, to control the residual risk. These are the seat belts in your car, the airbags, just in case things do go wrong. Gary spoke about the precautionary principle, and it is a principle in risk management that states that if an action raises the risk of causing serious or irreversible harm to the public or the environment, a precautionary approach should be taken, even if some cause and effect relationships are not scientifically established. Basically because in cases like this, where you're looking at damage to the environment or harm to the public, invariably it's very hard to get the genie back in the bottle. Once it's happened, it's happened. It's not a reversible situation. And absence of evidence is not evidence of absence of a hazard. And then we've got to look at the likelihood of something going wrong, especially in the case of shale gas. To extract 15% of all the shale gas reserves would require something like 33,000 wells across the north of England. Risston Spring, where they're building, iGas have permission to drill exploratory wells. One exploratory well site will involve 9,000 vehicle movements in a rural area. And then the water requirements. Each fracking operation can require up to 6,000 road tankers of water, of which 40 to 60% will come back up the well as contaminated waste. And they will require disposal as hazardous waste after the fracking. And then INEOS will also be looking at refracking these wells on a regular basis. The productivity of shale gas wells drops off rapidly after the initial frack, and there are plans to refrack these wells. So thinking that that little gas pad is going to be sat there doing its business forever is not correct. They will be back with the trucks, with the water, and the impacts will continue. The fracker's safety case, the regulatory framework is based on standards intended for the offshore oil and gas industry. The population density and amount of agriculture in the North Sea is a lot less than it is around North Nottinghamshire. Onshore fracking involves methods which carry a far higher risk profile. The scale of activity is up to 100 times higher. And regulations will not control natural subterranean phenomena. The Royal Academy and Royal Academy of Engineers report, in its summary, claims that hydraulic fracturing is an established technology that has been used for many decades. This is inaccurate. Well stimulation, hydraulic well stimulation has occurred for many decades and been used, but hydraulic fracturing, high volume hydraulic fracturing, is a relatively new development. The probability of well failure is low for a single well. This is how they base their argument that it is safe. It's low for a single well. Remember that, please. And 9 out of 10 recommendations in this report have not been implemented. So the shale gas industry are quite happy to quote this report as an authoritative statement, and yet they appear to have ignored most of its recommendations. The Public Health England report. It was based on currently available evidence in 2012. It said the problems result from operational failure and poor regulatory environment. And it did not consider the health impacts upon communities, such as dust, traffic, noise, odours, socio-economic impacts, or the health effects arising from climate change and greenhouse gas emissions. So for the shale gas industry to claim that this gives them carte blanche across all the hazards, health hazards, public health hazards presented by fracking is disingenuous. The British Medical Journal had something to say about the Public Health England report as well. They said it was a leap of faith unsubstantiated by scientific evidence. Further study is required. And another report by the DEFRA, Department of Energy, Department of Environment, Farming and Rural Affairs, was commissioned by the government. However, it didn't come out saying what the government wanted it to say. They said, any rural economy businesses that rely on clean air, land, water and a tranquil environment may suffer losses from this change. It says about businesses. What about the communities that rely on clean air, land, water and tranquil environments? Let's not consider them. This report, by the way, contains 61 redactions when it was first issued by the government, and it only came out in its full form as a result of a Freedom of Information request. So, the risks from fracking: water contamination, air pollution, noise, dust and light pollution, site traffic, there are stress and psychological impacts, loss of amenities such as house prices, loss of agricultural land, and effects on or of climate change. The threat to our water. This is a cross-section through North Nottinghamshire, running vaguely north to south. The orange, the shale, that's what they're after, this big shale bed. It's the source rock for oil, which has been extracted using conventional methods for quite some time in Nottinghamshire. But it contains many chemicals, it contains oil-like substances, benzene-based substances, which are better off staying down there. Above that we have the coal measures, and you can imagine what state they're in after 200 years of mining. And then above that, the aquifers and us. That aquifer is Sherwood Sandstone Aquifer. It's the second most important aquifer in the country, and it supplies 3 million people with their drinking water. That is the City of Nottingham's original drinking water supply. Sometimes they talk about the source receptor pathway when we're looking at environmental risks. This is the source of the problems. We are the receptors up here, our aquifer, our agriculture, our food and where we live. The fracking industry are going to implant lots of pathways between the two. They're going to put millions of pathways within the shale and thousands of pathways between the shale and us. The threat to our water, as Gary said, is not from the shale activities down below. It's up here in the wells. The well integrity is the issue. This is acknowledged by the British Geological Survey. This is one of their slides. And when we talk about well integrity, this man knows what he's talking about. Professor Tony Ingraffia from the University of Cornell University in America. His conclusion: all wells will eventually fail. I think his figures worldwide, and he studied hundreds of thousands over 30 years. His figures say something like 6% on commissioning, and after 20 years, 60% of wells will have failed. Look him up, look at some of his videos up on YouTube, they're very, very good. The governing body of the water industry, Water UK, say it's not taking sides over fracking, but the water supplies must be protected at all costs. Not so far as is reasonably practicable, is the level of duty that is quoted in the Royal Academy report. Not using best available techniques, but at all costs. That, to me, infers an absolute duty. And when we apply the precautionary principle and the principles of prevention, there's only one way we're going to achieve that, and that is to not frack. The European Parliament Water Group, the president of this group said, "We do not have the technology that would eliminate the danger of having water contaminated through the process." And there's another quote here: "Nobody can give a cast iron guarantee that there will be no incidents, but hopefully the water won't be contaminated." That was Mr. Gary Hayweood, April 2015 in Scotland. Seismic activity risks. There's only one well being fracked in this country, in Lancashire. And in May 2011, operations were suspended after the process triggered 2 minor earthquakes. And the larger of the earthquakes actually caused a well integrity failure. The Royal Academy report plays this down a bit, but it wasn't until 2 years after that Academy report was released that the compromised well was actually discovered and repaired. So basically, by inducing seismic activity, the frackers are undermining their own safety case. The traffic light system is a reactive measure. Something has to go wrong before restrictions are applied. Basically, they put seismic sensors around, and if they get anything greater than magnitude of 0.5, they stop and have a think about it. But there is always a presumption to proceed. They may reduce the pressure, they may reduce the volume of the frac, both of which will have an effect on productivity. However, 2 key issues here. Larger shocks are not necessarily preceded by the smaller ones, and seismic events may be delayed. And when you look at the scale of operations going on down there, you can understand that there's going to be interrelation between the wells. You may have some wells in production already and the fracking wells nearby, and that poses a threat to them. And this is a diagram that really shows what is happening in America with the shallow shale basins. UK shales are arranged in troughs, they lie in troughs, and there's a good chance they may try layering these and going in at multiple levels with multiple lateral wells, therefore compounding the risk. Health effects from air pollution. We have benzene and related compounds released as a result of drilling. I said there's this toxic organic soup down in this shale, and that comes up as part of the waste. We also get fumes released during normal routine drilling activities. There's also radon gas. The shale contains uranium salts. This decays and gives off radon gas, which is a proven carcinogen. We have problems with radon gas in parts of North Nottinghamshire due to the permeability of the mines coming through, and parts of Derbyshire are already radon hotspots. The World Health Organization has a stand on benzene. They say it's a major public health concern, and public health actions are needed to reduce the exposure of both workers and the general public. That's reduce it, not propagate it. And the science on shale gas development. Again, the shale lobby talk a lot about the Royal Academy and the Public Health England reports. Subsequent to their publication, there are now over 1,000, this is an old slide, 1,000 peer-reviewed publications on the impact of shale gas, and 80% of peer-reviewed literature has been released since those reports came out. The weight of evidence, 84% contain findings which indicate adverse public health hazards, issues or outcomes. 69% show similar regarding water quality, and 87% regarding air quality. And the Pennsylvania Medical Society in 2016 called for a moratorium on new shale gas drilling and fracking, an independent health registry, and a study on the public health impacts. Pennsylvania is the hotbed of fracking, it's the world capital of fracking. If anybody's going to know about it, they're going to know about it. But these are all short-term health effects. Fracking's only really been going on for about 12 or 14 years. What about the long-term health effects? What do we know? We don't know anything about it yet, but we do have a useful lesson from history. Despite being banned nearly 20 years ago, asbestos is still Britain's biggest industrial killer. The exposure can be monitored through imports throughout the 20th century, and the after effect here, that traces the incidence of mesothelioma, which is a terminal lung cancer of the lining of the lungs, almost 100% attributable to asbestos exposure. The cause and effect and the delay, if we look at the 1960s to today, are quite clear to see. We're still losing about 40 people a week from asbestos-related diseases. The first death was registered back in 1904, and gradually throughout this century, the cries came out louder and louder to have it banned, and until the 1980s was when the campaign reached its height. It was about here that the asbestos industry in this country went bust. So who's picking up the tab for this? The insurance companies, the National Health Service, the social services, the victims and their families. Now, in defending asbestos, the industry went onto the defensive in the 70s and the 80s. Scientific reports were redacted and suppressed. There was massive PR spending. Campaigners and activists were labelled as subversives and scaremongers and even communists in the 80s. And increasing public awareness was described as a sinister development within the industry. Today, this is looking ominously familiar to me. Now we look at the gold standard regulations and the take on the gold standard regulations that we have. We do have very good regulation systems in this country. But gold standard regulations and the level of compliance are two different things. Believe me, I've worked in the power industry as a health and safety advisor for the past 10 years. I know what was going on. INEOS, they claimed that there were control risks through engineering excellence and operational rigour. The pollution performance of INEOS's Grangemouth oil refinery was rated as poor by the Scottish Environmental Protection Agency in 2010, 11 and 12. This is still going on, by the way. It's not so much that interests me, but the company's response. They say the company stressed that its performance was also classified as broadly compliant and excellent under different pollution regimes. Now, this is the Scottish Environmental Protection Agency. Grangemouth is in Scotland. What regime is supposed to apply? The fracking industry are calling the American regulatory regime and saying it's not fit for purpose and not as good as our standards, and yet they're quite happy to adopt any regime that happens to fit their level of performance. But it's not just INEOS. The fracking industry have other records. Rathling Energy at West Newton. In the late summer of 2014, there were 19 breaches of permit conditions at its Holderness site. Every one of those breaches was initially reported by members of the public, not by the enforcement agencies. They were upheld by the enforcement agencies, and in one communication from a senior manager in Rathling Energy to the Environment Agency, he actually insinuated that the members of the public were lying about the gas fumes being released from the site. That complaint was later upheld. The drilling rig had also not been certified for use in the UK. And at Tinker Lane in Blyth, iGas are applying for planning permission. They haven't got planning permission yet, but they've stuck some infrastructure on the site. So they say that these planning regulations are part of the protection for us, and yet they're quite happy to ignore them and drive a bus through them. So what are the benefits from shale gas? Are the risks justified? Does it give increased energy security? The UK Energy Research Centre says it's unlikely to be of sufficient scale to significantly reduce our import dependence or impact prices. And in 2015 we actually exported 160 terawatt hours of gas. That's 20% of what we needed. 3 weeks ago, in Letwell, near Rotherham, the question was asked of INEOS, can you guarantee that you won't export this gas? We are a commercial company, said Mr. Hayweood. We know where the motives lie. And we talk about plastics and the need for plastics. Here's an initiative from Adidas. Last year they made 7,000 pairs of trainers from ocean recovered plastic. They did it just as a PR stunt. They sold like that. They're now making another million, and they've undertaken to remove virgin plastic from their supply chains. This is an example of having social licence. That is one thing that the fracking industry have not got and will never have in this country. They claim it would generate significant tax revenue and growth. Yet, two of the major players in the UK shale industry, Quadrilla and Third Energy, are both owned by holding companies resident in the Cayman Islands. In 2010, INEOS moved HQ to Switzerland in order to avoid paying £405 million in taxes. And INEOS Shale can sell their gas in internal company markets. They don't have to show a profit at the wellhead. Those company benefits that were mentioned, the benefits to the communities and things like that, and the tax benefits will be reliant upon the cost of the gas at the wellhead, the cost of the money that they get for it. The Oxford Institute for Energy Studies estimates a break-even point for shale gas of $7.5 to $15.5 per million BTU, and yet the wholesale price at the moment is about $5. and the US shale sector has been cash flow negative since 2009. Nobody's making money out of shale gas. And what about energy conservation? We don't, that's two concepts we never hear from INEOS: conservation and sustainability. A robust home insulation programme will cut gas imports by 26% by 2030. That's approximately 16% of demand. By 2030, that's more than the shale gas industry could be providing by then. The final word is from the oil and gas industry. Mr. Alston, Executive Vice President of Mobil: making fracking safe is simply just not possible. Thank you for your time.
That ends our first half. I think you'll agree we've had two very thought-provoking presentations. We now have a 15-minute interval, and when we come back, we will have a question and answer session. First of all, Bill, our secretary, rather than myself, will be chairing that. We'll have a 5-minute recap on the part of both speakers, 5 minutes each, and then there will be a question and answer or statement session of about 30 minutes. So do think of your questions. Unfortunately, we don't have the bar open upstairs tonight. They are rather understaffed, we sometimes do have, so I'm afraid you will have to go downstairs. And it'll probably be a bit crowded down there. But see you back in 15 minutes. Thank you very much.